Time now for our roundtable with Anna Mancuso, a Republican political strategist, and News Channel 5 political analyst, Brian Crowley. It's been a while since I've seen these guys. I have to remember. Thank you for both coming in.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to both of you. Okay, well, the U.S. airstrike that just took place the other day killed Iran's top military leader. Does this now become the top issue on the presidential campaign, Brian?
Well, there's no question, at least in the short term. Depending how this plays out, at least in the short term, yeah, it's going to be, in fact, it probably has overcome all the other issues. When you look like you're going to war, that tends to take precedence over everything else. And I'm not saying we're going to war, but right now, as the days play out, and we don't know exactly what Iran's reaction is going to be and what we'll do to react to Iran again, yeah, I don't see how foreign policy doesn't become a top issue.
Mariana.
Absolutely. This has thrust foreign policy right into the spotlight, and we'll start to see some of the candidates talk about it and take position. We've already heard from Congress, and we've seen people go on Twitter and talk about how this needed to be done but needed congressional blessing and all of these things. And so I think we're going to see a lot of pushback from the Democrats naturally in this hyper-partisan times, but we're going to see the Republicans try and move this football forward.
In terms of what could Iran do in response? Now, we've watched over the last couple of months as Iran has launched rockets at ships in the Persian Gulf and attacks in Saudi Arabia. And so can we defend and say, well, this was us just sort of getting ahead of the game? Or, I mean, how does that, it's sort of a tit for tat, if you will.
Well, I think, I'm mind reading a little bit here, but I think the message that the Trump administration was trying to come out with this attack on this evil, evil man who killed thousands of people, including Americans, he wants to swing the baseball bat at their heads, and that's what he did. And basically, if you come back at us, we're going to hit you harder. And will that work? I don't know. I'm not an expert on the Iranian people, but we're bigger and badder than they are, so I don't think they want to get into too big a conflict. On the other hand, I think overall, Democrats, independents, Republicans, the average person out there, they're weary of the Middle East. We've been involved in war in the Middle East in one way or another since 9/11. Nobody feels like there's been any real progress made. It's always seems to be a mess. We continue to have people killed. You saw what happened to our embassy last week. I think there's a bit of exhaustion with the things that go on in Afghanistan, Iraq, and the rest of the Middle East. I talk to a lot of people who wish we would just get out.
Well, right or wrong, the president's decision, does this keep us in the Middle East, at least through this presidential campaign, or if the president is reelected through another 4 years?
It creates the opportunity, but I think one thing that we have to step back is really understand who this person was that we took out, because a lot of people aren't understanding the geopolitics of it. And what we know is that the way that this is being pitched out in Iran and the way that the Middle Eastern people are talking about it, it's as though somebody came and took out one of our joint chiefs of staff. And if you do that, that is obviously going to elicit a very strong response. And currently what they're talking about over there, they are saying this is a form of American terrorism. And so that could cause a rise and cause a lot of problems for us over there. We already know that they're asking any type of American that are in Iraq to evacuate the state, evacuate the country, come back to America. They're really working on, shuttering up the embassies, and we've already greenlit troops to head over to Kuwait.
Does this put impeachment? You were talking about other things. There are a lot of other things going on in the world. Impeachment. I mean, next week Congress is back in Washington. Impeachment. That was all about November and December. Does that slide to the back burner, or is it too big a topic?
On Friday, the Senate was back in session. They didn't vote or do anything, but they were back in session. Mitch McConnell stood up opening the Senate session, and the first thing he talked about was what happened in Iran, and he spoke about that at some length with this assassination. And then he talked at great length about the impeachment. So I don't think the impeachment's going away, and I'm not convinced it'll take a back seat because it's there. They have to deal with it. But it could be difficult for the Democrats, and particularly, I honestly, I don't understand Nancy Pelosi's holding on to the impeachment, and it could be that people are like, we're in the midst of this potential military crisis, this foreign policy crisis. Doesn't this overshadow playing games with the impeachment? And the Democrats, they probably need to move this thing over to the Senate like now.
Mariana, what do you think?
This should have been done right after they had the articles. There's no need to hold them on, put them in a drawer or anything. We just need to move this forward, either get this done and let's continue on, because as we see, the president's moving forward on foreign policy agenda, and I'll tell you right now, I'm really glad that we're finally taking a focus on foreign policy.
February 4th is when the president's supposed to do his State of the Union. Will we have an impeachment trial before then? What do you think, bro?
It's so hard to predict what's going on. There seems to have been a great absence of logic in a lot of this stuff on both the Republican and the Democratic side on this, and between the House and the Senate. You know, maybe we need to think about in the 2020 election to elect some grown-ups in both parties to be in Congress. Who knows?
February 4th, they'd have to move pretty quick.
Yeah, before that would get in there.
If anything, that's not
At least send the paperwork over.
Yes.
You know,
You mentioned 2020 electing grown-ups. Do you guys think this will have any impact on our congressional races, Marianne?
It's going to be interesting to see if this can maintain a level of momentum. That is not me suggesting we should go to war with Iran. I think that there has to be a level of momentum. This was literally a flash in the pan that took the life of somebody who was very evil, as Brian pointed out. And what happens next, we're going to have to stay vigilant and watch for the next couple of
well,
days.
the other wild card, kind of bouncing off our previous guest, is the economy. You know, we saw the stock market's initial reaction to what happened on Friday, which is not unexpected. But if all of these events start to trigger a big downfall in the economy, then we're back to the number one issue for everybody: how's my pocketbook look?
The 2020 presidential campaign, we've seen Mike Bloomberg putting out a lot of ads attacking Donald Trump.
God, wouldn't you kill to be his consultant? The money they're
the money that they're spending. Well, now, I mean, what does he do now? I mean, he's sort of been the outsider trying to gain some access into the top tier, if you will. I mean, again, he's got unlimited funds, it seems, but does he have to end up changing these ads?
No, you know, his strategy is to wait for Super Tuesday, bypass New Hampshire and Iowa and South Carolina and Nevada, wait for Super Tuesday, do so well in Super Tuesday because the rest of the field is a mess and there's nobody in the lead. And then by the time we get to Florida's primary on March 17th, you know, he'll just roll away as the nominee. Who knows? I mean, if he succeeds, he will have totally disrupted the early primary system. Suddenly New Hampshire and Iowa, they're sweating bullets over this because they don't want Michael Bloomberg to suddenly turn their events into meaningless events.
Yeah, he's waiting for them to cannibalize themselves through New Hampshire and Iowa, and we'll see here in Florida. He's playing a Super Tuesday strategy, and whether people agree with that or disagree with it, that's the reality of it. And we know that while Trump is holding a $100 million war chest I saw this morning, the reality is that Michael Bloomberg can outspend him easily 2-1.
Mariana, Brian, as always, very insightful. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back with more in a moment.